Responsive web design. So CSS Grid or CSS Grid is a newer standard that makes it easy to build complex responsive layouts. It works by turning an HTML element into a grid and lets you place child element anywhere within. In this course, you will learn the fundamental of CSS grids by building different complex layouts, including a blog. Create, create your first CSS grid. Turn an HTML element into a grid container by setting its display property to grid. This gives you the ability to use all the other property associated with CSS grid. Note in CSS grid, the parent element is referred to as a container and its children are called items. Change the display of the div with the container class to grid. So in the container class should have the display grid. So it will be so the parent so the container will be referred as the grid container, and these divs these 5 div will be referred as the children called items. This gives the ability to use all the other property associated with CSS grid. So run the test, go to the next challenge. Add columns with grid template columns. Simply creating a grid template doesn't get you very far. You need to define the structure of the grid as well. To add some column to the grid, use the grid template column property on a grid container as demonstrated below. Dot container display grid, then the grid template column 50 pixel 50 pixels. So this will give you the grid two columns that are each 50 pixel wide. So the two column with 50 pixel wide. The number of parameter given to the grid template column property indicates the number of column in the grid, and the value of each parameter indicates the width of the each column. Give the grid container three columns that are each 100 pixel. These as the two columns with each 50 pixel wide. So we have to give it here three column that has each 100 pixel wide. So display grid already mentioned, we are using the grid CSS grid functionality. Now grid grid template columns, so we have to give 100 pixel and 100 pixel and 100 pixel, so like this. So this 100 pixel, this 100 pixel, and this 100 pixel, these were 1 2 3 4 5. Now 1 2 3 4 5. Give the, so it has the three grid columns. It has this 1 2 3 grid columns with the number that and the value of each parameter. So the 100 pixel indicates the width of the each column. So container class would have the grid template property with 3 units of 100 pixel. So we can also give another 100 pixel also. So there will be 4, and if we give another 100 pixel, then it will be 5. 3 only. If you run the test, go to the next challenge. Add rows with grid template column. The grid you created in the last challenge will set the number of rows automatically. To adjust your rows manually, use the grid template rows property in the same way you use grid template column in the previous challenge. The two rows to the grid that are 50 pixel tall each. So similar as the grid template column, for the columns 100 pixel, 100 pixel and 100 pixel, we have to keep grid template rows. So we have to have two rows of 50 pixel. So this 50 pixel is the only one 50 pixel. So the first row is only becoming 50 pixel, then also another row also to be the 50 pixel, then both are the 50 pixel. Container class should have a grid template for property with 2 units of 50 pixels. So if you run the test, go to the next challenge. Use CSS grid units to make the to change use CSS grid units to change the size of the column and rows. You can use absolute or relative units like pixel or em in CSS grid to define the size of the rows and column. You can use these as well. Fr sets the column or row to a fraction of the available space. Auto sets the column or row to the width or height of its content automatically. Percentage adjust the column or row to the percent width of its content. And this is the code that generates the output in the preview. So 2fr1, this snippet creates the 5 column 1 2 3 4 5. So the first one is the auto, the first 5 column. The first column is as wide as its content. The first column is wide as as its content. The second column is 50 pixels. So the second column, this is only the 2 is the 50 pixel. The third column is 10% of the container, and for the last two columns, the remaining space is divided into three sections. Two are allocated for the fourth column and one is for the fifth column. This clearly demonstrates this picture how it is using the grid template column auto 50 pixel 10% and 2fr, which is a fraction of the remaining space. So the fraction, this fraction of the this is the remaining space after allocating the auto, which means the around its content only, then the 50 pixel, then the 10% of the container. Now the remaining space is divided two fraction for the four, fourth div and one fraction for the fifth div, which is the one like this. Make a grid with these with 3 columns which widths are as followed: 1fr 100 pixel and 2fr. So container should have a grid template column that has a 3 column with 1fr. So this is the row we have to make. We have to delete this, I think. So now 1fr, 1fr, then 100 pixel and 2fr. Now what happened here is this is the one fraction, this is the 100 pixel, and this is the remaining two fraction, and after that it will be repeated. After that the column are the 50 pixel, 50 pixel. If you run the test, go to the next challenge. Create a column gap using grid column gap. So far in the grid you have created the columns. The columns have all been tied up against each other. Sometimes you want to gap in between the columns. To add the gap between the columns, use a grid column gap property like this. So the grid column gap 10 pixel. This creates 10 pixel of empty spaces between all of our column which are inside the container. So give it the 20 pixels. So grid column gap equal to 20 pixels. So this will have the 20 pixel, and if you need in the row also of 20 pixels, so like a row like this, but in this case we will only have the column gap. So if you run the test, go to the next challenge, create a row gap using grid row gap. You can add the gap between the rows or the grid using grid row gap in the same way you added a gap between the column in the previous challenge. Create a gap of rows that is 5% tall. So rows are always tall, and so grid row gap is 5 pixel. So the small gap between the row has been allocated. Container class should have the grid row gap property that has the value of 5%. If you run the test, go to the next challenge. All gaps faster with grid gap. Grid gap is a shorthand property for grid row gap and grid column gap. From the previous two challenges, there are more convenient that's more convenient to use. If grid gap has one value, it will create a gap between all rows and all columns. However, if there are two values, it will use the first one to set the gap between the row and another one to set between the column value for the column. Use a grid gap to introduce 10 pixel gap between the rows and 20 pixel gap between the columns, like that. So in this, if we this have the this is the one fr one fraction. So in this we have to give if grid gap only. If you write like this, we can include, and it is a shorthand for grid row gap and grid column gap from which we used from the previous challenge. And if it has only one value like this, 10 grid gap to 10, it will create the gap between all rows. So why it is not working? 10 watt, 10 pixel, 10 pixel, 10 em, sorry, 10 pixel we should write. So it create like this, then the light pixel, then it gives the grid gap to row and column equally. So and if we need row to be only the 10 pixel and the column to be 20 pixel, so the column gap, which is this column gap, is now 20 pixel. So container class should have the grid gap property that introduce the 10 px gap between the rows and 20 pixel gap between the columns. 20 pixel gap and the 10 pixel gap here. So if you run the test, go to the next arrange. Use grid column to control spacing. Up to this point, all the properties that had been discussed as for the grid container. The grid column property is the first one to use on the grid item themselves. So the hypothetically horizontal and vertical lines that create the grid are referred to as the lines. These lines are numbered starting with 1 at the top left corner of the grid and move right for the column and down for the rows counting upward. So 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4 row lines, column lines. This is what the line look like for the 3 by 3 grid. To control the number of columns an item will consume, you can use grid column property in conjunction with the line number you want to you want the item to start and stop. So here is the example: grid column 1 by 3. This will make the item start at the first vertical line of the grid on the left. So the 3 here on the left, and span the third line of the grid consuming 2 columns. Make the item 5 2 columns. Conjugate the grid. Why it is not working? Item should have the grid column property. Item 5 should have the grid column property with the result in consuming the last 2 columns of the grid. If you run the test, item class should have the grid property with the result in its consuming the last 2. So you can, this will make the item start at the vertical line. So the vertical line of the grid on the left and span to the third line. So in this, I think grid column, what we can do here is the grid column consume the last 2. So I think 2 by 2 is not working. 2 by 3, 2, so 3 by 2. So this is in second. So second to 2, I think third. If you run the test, property which result in it consuming the last 2 columns of the grid. Oh, last 2 columns of the grid. So what we can do here is 1 by 2. Okay, not 2 by 2. So we have to start from 2 to 3. If you run the test, so to control the number of columns an item will consume, you can use grid column in conjunction with the line number you want to start. So in the line from 2 or 3 to 3. So what we can do is 3 to 3, 3 to 3 to 1. So but it is in next column. Why it is in next column? What we have to do, we have to fill out this whole thing 3 by 3. So if you run the test, also it is not working. If we have 3 into 3, 2 by 2 by 3 by 4. Oh my god, 2 by 4, because you have to so these are the lines. These are the lines 1, 2, So this is the 1 here, 2, 3 and 4. I can show you like that quick. This is the important one, and I have been tricked a lot for this. So what here is so what we got here is this is the box. You got it. So this is the box. No, we can do this color because not visible. So this is the grid container, and this is so I can make some. So and this one is the first one here, this one is the second one here, okay, this one is the third one here, and here is the fourth one here, and similarly here is the first one here, and the second one here, third one here, and this is the fourth one here. So 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 this is the so this is the column 1. So this is the column 2. What? 2. This is the column 3, and this is the column 4. You can see this is the column 4. Similarly, this is the 1, this is the 1, this is the 2, this is the 3, and this is the 4. I can show you here also. This is the 1, this is the 2, this is the 3, this is the 4. So what is happening in this? So what is happening in this grid column 2 by 4 is where it started. So what is the requirement? Make the item with the class item 5. So which is the item 5? So this is the item 5. Make the item so this is the item. So I can show you. So this is the item 5, okay, which is inside here. So I can give you the good. So you as a all the property in the first one used to grid item themselves. The item hypothetical horizontal and vertical lines I created grid are referred to as the lines. These lines are numbered from 1 to at the top corner of the grid and moves right for the column and down for the rows. This is what this is this is we get. So this is what the lines look like for the 3 by 3 grid, like this. To control the number of the columns an item will consume, you can use the grid column property in conjunction with the line in the conjunctions. These are the conjunctions with the line number you want to start item to start and stop. So what we have in here is this is the grid column. So and this is the item 5. So this is the item 5. Make the item of the class make the item with the class item 5 the item 5 class, which is this class. Make this item 5 class consume the last two column of the grid. So to consume the last two grid, it was here. So to consume this from the grid column conjunction, which is from this 2 to 4, which is at the last. This is so we can now have the specified two column of the grid for the item 5. So the item 5 consume the last two item of the grid. Hope you have understood this grid concept and this topic. Now if you run the test, go to the next challenge. Use grid row to control spacing. So I can exit it menu quite. Use grid column to control spacing. Of course, you can make item consume multiple row. You just like you can with columns. You define the horizontal line you want to item to start and stop at using grid row property on a grid item. Make a element with the item 5 class consume the last two rows. So these are the columns. So last two rows. So item 5 consume the last two rows. So this will be the good demonstration of what we learned in the previous challenge. So if we give it the grid now, grid row, so we have to consume the last two rows. So starting from this for 1 and 2, so starting from 2 to I think 4 is the obvious one. So if you item class should have the grid row property, item should have the grid row property, which results it in consuming the last two rows of the grid. If you run the test, it is completed. Align an item horizontally using justify cell. In CSS Grid, the content of each item is located in a box which is referred to as a cell. You can align the content's position within its cell horizontally using justify cell property on a grid item. By default, this property has a value of stretch, which will make the content fill the whole width of the cell. This CSS Grid property accepts other values as well. Start aligns the content at the left of the cell. Center aligns the content to the center of the cell. Aligns the content to the right of the cell. We use the justify cell property to center the item with the class item 2 with the item 2 class justify cell center. This is center aligned. If you give it the end, so it will be at the end center. If you run the test, go to the next challenge. Align an item vertically using align cell. Just as you align an item horizontally, there is a way to align an item vertically as well. To do, you use the align cell property to on an item. This property has all the same values as justify cell from the last challenge. So align cell center. So this is vertically aligned. Align the item 3. Run the test item 3. So it is end. So at the end, similarly at the start also. If you do not give anything, it is fully, then end, then center. So I will give end. Run the test, go to the next challenge. Align all items horizontally using justify item. Sometimes you want all the item in your CSS grid to share the same alignment. You can use the previously known property and align them individually, or you can align them at all once by using justify item on your grid container. So the container, this property can accept all the same values you learned about in the previous two challenge. The difference being that it will move all the item in our grid to the desired alignment. Use the property to center all our item horizontally. So in the container we have one FR, one FR grid, one FR, one FR, one FR grid template column, one FR, one FR, one FR grid template columns, grid gap equal to 10 pixel. So now we have to give the justify items center like this. So if you also give the online items center like this. If you run the test, go to the next challenge. Align all items vertically using align items. Use the align item property and a grid container will set the vertical alignment of the all elements in our grid. Use it now to move all the elements to the end of each cell. So end of each cell. So align items at the end of each cell like this. If you run the test, go to the next challenge. All divide the grid into an area template. You can group cells of your grid together into an area and give the area a custom name. Do this by using grid template areas on the container like this. The code above merges the top three cells together into an area named header, the bottom three cells into the footer, and it makes two areas in the middle row. Add word and content. Note every word in the code represents a cell. Every pair of the quotation marks represent a row. So represents a cell. Every word has the cell, and every pair of quotation describes the row. In addition to custom label, you can use a period to designate the empty cell into a grid. Also place the area template so that the cell labeled Edward become an empty cell. So grid template areas. This is the header, Edward, content, footer. Place the area template so that the cell labeled Edward becomes the empty cell. Similar to instead of this is the dot. This is the it is completed. So every word in the represent the cell, every pair of the quotation represent the row. In addition to custom label, you can use a period to designate the empty cell in the grid. So it is the content. This is the empty. But in this we have given this empty. Go to the next challenge. Place item in a grid using the grid area property. After creating the area template for your grid container, As shown in the previous challenge, you can place an item in your custom area by referencing the name you gave it. To do this, you can use grid area. So grid template area. Now the grid area property on an item like this. Item 1 grid area header. This lets the grid know that you want the item 1 class to go in the area named header. So this should go in the name header. In this case, the item will use the entire top row because then the whole row is named as a header area. Place an element with the item 5. So this item 5 class in the footer. So what you can do is grid area footer area using grid area. So this goes to the footer. Similarly, if you don't do this, if you give grid area, this is in the content. If you give the header full header, because the 3 1 is header. So run the test. Go to the next challenge. Use grid area without creating an template area template. The grid area property you learned in the last challenge can be used in another way. If your grid doesn't have an areas template to reference, you can create an area on a on the fly for an item to be placed like this. Item 1 grid area 1 by 1 by 2 by 4. This is using the line numbers you learned about earlier to define where the area for this item will be. The number in the example above represent grid area. Horizontal line to start at, vertical line to start at, horizontal line to end at, and vertical line to end at. Horizontal and but horizontal line from here to start like this. So the item in the example will consume the rows between line 1. So 1 1 1. So from the second line, then the ends at 2 and sorry for the background noise, please be concentrate. So the item in the example will consume the row between line 1 and the column between the 1 and 4. Using the grid area property, place the item 5 class between the third and fourth horizontal line and between the first and fourth vertical line. So item 1 now the grid area. What we have to do What you have to do here is between the first and the fourth horizontal line. 1, 2, 3. So the first horizontal. So what is here is horizontal line to start. So this is the horizontal line to start from this. This is from this to the fourth from here, and starting from here, it is already starting from here, and we have to end it between the first and fourth vertical. So between the first and fourth. third, yeah, what is happening? Between the third and fourth horizontal lines, third and fourth horizontal line, no, 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 it is not going to the so this is the complex one, I think. So how we can do if we do this? Is it working, not working? So what we can do is place the element within with item 5 class between the third and fourth horizontal line. So this is horizontal line. So first one, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, this is the 3 and 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and so 3 by 4, I think. And now, and between the fourth and the fourth vertical lines for the first and 1, 3, 4 vertical lines. I think it should work, but it is not working. So what is get help? Get a hint, please. Horizontal. The grid area takes the value in the form of vertical line to start, horizontal line to. So grid A. So the grid area 3144. So what is it like? It is complicated. What is this thing? So starting from the third horizontal line, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3 horizontal line in the first one. Okay. Oh, third and fourth horizontal from the starting of the fourth horizontal line and between the so the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So ending at 4 by 4 here. So this is the correct answer. If you run the test, go to the next challenge. Reduce repetition using the repeat function. When you use grid template column or grid template rows to define the structure of the grid, you enter the value for each row or column you created. Let's say you want to grid 100 rows of the same height. It isn't very practical to insert 100 values individually. Fortunately, there is a better way by using the repeat function to specify the number of times you want your column or row to be repeated, followed by a comma and the value you want to repeat. Here is an example that would create 100 row grid. Each row at a 50% tall, 50 pixel tall. This is for the row grid template row. Repeat 100 rows of 50 pixel. You can also repeat multiple values with the repeat function and insert a function amongst other values, then defining a grid structure. Here is what it looks like: grid template column, repeat 2 1FR 1FR 50 repeat 2 1FR 50 pixel 20 pixel. This translates repeat grid template column 1FR 50 pixel 1FR 50 pixel, okay, and a 20 pixel. The 1FR is repeated twice followed by the 20 pixel. Use repeat to remove the repetition from the grid template column property. So in the column property, so these are the three. So we can do like what we can do like a repeat 3 of 1FR like this. Container class will have the property that is set to the repeat 3 column with the 1FR. If you run the test, go to the next challenge. Limit items using the MinMax function. There is another built-in function to use the grid template column and grid template row called MinMax. It is used to limit the size of item when the grid container changes size. To do this, you need to specify the acceptable size range for your item. Here is the example: grid template column 100 pixel, min max 50 pixel, 200 pixel. In this code, grid template column is set to create two columns. The first is 100 pixel wide and the second has the minimum width of 500 pixel and maximum width of 200. The first one has the 100 pixel and the second one has the minimum of 50 pixel and maximum of 100 pixel. Using the MinMax function, replace the 1FR in the repeat function with the column size that has the minimum width of 90 pixel and maximum width of 1FR, and resize the previous preview panel to see the effect. Replace the 1FR in the repeat function. So the container grid template column property that is set to repeat 3 column with the minimum. So replace the 1FR in the repeat function with the column size. So what I think here is this is the 1FR, then min max of 90 pixel and 1FR. What this look like? The first one will have the one fraction always, and the second one will have the minimum of 90 pixel and maximum of maximum of, I don't know what is happening. Oh, minimum of 90 pixel, maximum of 1FR. Okay, minimum 90 pixel and maximum of 1FR. So the 1FR same like that. So if you run the test, but they set to the 3 column with the minimum that is set to repeat 3 columns. I think it was like repeat. Okay, repeat min max of 90 pixel and 1FR like this. Now working. So what is the right answer then? What is the right answer? So if you get the help and get the hint, it is saying your program explains the MinMax function in convention exactly challenge a function is exactly what this challenge describes you, but this was not inevitably obvious to make at first. The way to pass this challenge is to remove the max width bit within the repeat function and then add the MinMax function in place of a repeat max width function. Before it was like this: grid template column repeat 3 so like this. So what is happening if you run the test? It is not getting now also. So I think the 90 pixel, okay, 90 pixel if you run the test. Repeat. Now it is working. So what we did here is using the MinMax function replace using the MinMax function replace the 1fr in the repeat function. Use a column size that has the minimum width of 90 pixel and the maximum width of 1fr and resize minimum width of 90 pixel. This is the 90 pixel and the maximum of 1fr, which is distributed among all. If you run the test, go to the next challenge. Create flexible layouts using AutoFill. The repeat function comes with an option called AutoFill. This allows you to automatically insert as many rows or columns of your desired size as possible depending on the size of the container. You can create flexible layouts when combining AutoFill with MinMax like this. Repeat AutoFill MinMax 60 pixel is the minimum and 1fr is the maximum. When the container changes size, the setup keeps inserting 60 pixel column and stretch them until it can insert another one. Note, if your container can't fit all your item on one row, you can move them into down to the new one. In the first grid, use autofill with a repeat to fill the grid with columns that have the minimum width of 60 pixels and the maximum of 1fr. Then resize the preview to see the autofill in action. So instead of this, we can do auto. What is this? There are the two containers. It was 3 min max 60 pixel is the smallest one. This is 60 pixel, then the one FR. So we can do the auto fill 60 pixel, 60 pixel. So this is the non-repeatable one. The second one is non-repeatable one. Add the 60 pixel like this. That will fill the grid with column that have the minimum width of 60 pixel and maximum. one flexion. Submit and go to the next element. Create flexible layouts using AutoFill. AutoFit. AutoFit works almost identical to AutoFill. The only difference is that when the container size exceeds the limit of the all element combined, AutoFill keep inserting empty rows or columns and pushes your item to the side, while AutoFit collapses those empty rows or columns and stretches your item to fit the size of the container. Note, if your container can't fit all your item on one row, it will move them down to the new one. In the second grid, use the this is the AutoFill. Now we'll be using AutoFit. So here this works same. After that it work like this. AutoFill and AutoFit. Here it is same, but here it works. So what we need, sometimes we can have the AutoFill and sometimes we can have the AutoFit. AutoFit is always good. If we then decide to see the difference on the test, go to the next challenge. Use media queries to create responsive layouts. CSS Grid can be the easy way to make your site more responsive by using media queries to rearrange grid area. Change dimension of the grid by rearranging the placement of the items. In the preview, when the viewport width is 300 pixels or more, the number of columns changes from 1 to 2. The advertisement area then occupies the left column completely. So when the viewport width is 300 pixels or more, the number of column changes from 1 to 2. So if the viewport is width is 300 pixels, so this is 300 pixels and the more. Area then occupies the left completely. So what we can do here is, when the viewport width is 400 pixels or more, make the header occupy the top row completely and the footer area occupy the bottom row completely. So how we can do that? So if the 400 pixel goes here, okay, after the 400 pixel goes here, class should have the grid template to occupy header area, footer occupy the top and bottom rows respectively. Auto and 1FR and the 300 pixel minimum. Auto. So what we can do now is I can do header here, not working. Footer. This is item 1 is the header. Why it is not working? So at the 400 pixel I think. So this is the 300 and after the 400 pixel so this is the and this is below 300 pixel. This is the min height 300 pixel or more. This is the min height 300 pixel or more. 400 pixels or 400 pixel or more. If you run the test, what we have done here, these are the item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4. So we can change here later. And in the 300 pixel, this is the grid template column. Grid template area has been defined here. These are header, advert, content, footer, which is the this one. And at the 300 pixel, we have given like this. If we run the test, go to the next challenge. Create grids within grids. Turning an element into grid only affects the behavior of its direct descendants. So by turning a direct descendant into a grid, you have to grid within a grid. For example, by setting the display and grid template column property of the element with the item 3 class, you create a grid within a grid. So what is the item 3? Item 3 has the paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. Turn the elements of the origin into grid and 2 column with the width of auto and 1 FR using display. So what we have to do is grid inside the grid area content. So this is the content. What? This is the oh this is the content. Okay, this is the content one, this paragraph and paragraph 2. So what we have to do here is display again grid. So it is working, I think. Now the grid template columns auto and 1FR. So this is the auto, this is the 1FR. Auto means only the content like this, and the 400 pixel the media query are not here. Item 3 class should have the grid column template property with auto and 1FR. Item 3 should have the display property with the background grid. Turning the element into the grid only affects the behavior of the direct descendant. So by turning the direct descendant into grid, you have the grid within grid. Turn the element with the item 3 class into the grid with 2 columns. Okay. If you run the test, go to the next challenge. We have completed now the CSS grid. Will be doing the now the responsive web design projects. 5 projects are included. These are the products. We will be completing this in the coming tutorials. Now the important and most interesting part has came to the end. We will be doing some of the beautiful projects I have from the by utilizing these fundamental and basic concepts of HTML5, CSS3, and all the topics we have completed. So even if you do not have completed the tutorials from the playlist responsive web design, please complete those tutorials and follow along to grasp the full knowledge while building these 5 projects. So I will see you in the coming session with the projects. So until then, peace.